Well, hello and welcome to my latest video. Now, some of you who are more recent subscribers or viewers to this channel may think that my channel is all about cycling, but it isn't all about cycling. And one of the things that I used to do quite a lot of is movie reviews. Now, you haven't seen a video with a movie review for a while, and there's a pretty good reason for that. I haven't been to the movies. Yes, because of COVID and everything else, they've either been shut or we just haven't gone. But last night, for the first time in over a year, I went to the movies, the Dulwich Picture House, with my favourite movie buddy, my son Joel, and we went to see Suicide Squad. So you want to know, what's it like? Is it any good? Should you spend your money? Well, stick around and you'll find out. Now, those of you of a certain age, in other words, most of you who aren't, may vaguely remember a film called The Dirty Dozen, which came out in 1967 and starred some of the luminaries of the silver screen at that time. Ernest Borgnine, Telly Savalas, do you remember him, at a time when bald men were in vogue? Robert Ryan, Charles Bronson, and Donald Sutherland, and they played a group of hardened criminals who were offered their freedom if during the Second World War they would undertake a dangerous mission. Now, Suicide Squad copies that plot, although when I said to my son they ripped off the plot of Dirty Dozen, he said, well, it's drawn from a Suicide Squad story which first appeared in a comic in 1959. So who ripped off whom? I don't know. Anyway, the story is basically the same. What is it they say? There are only 7 plots in the world. So a plot where a group of vaguely goodies who might or might not be baddies have to rescue or destroy a baddie who lives in a castle who wants to take over the world, or something like that, is one of the original plots. And therefore, Suicide Squad copies this plot. And does it do it well? Well, I've got to tell you, right, I generally find these kind of superhero movies a while of pank, but I really enjoyed Suicide Squad. I thought it was great. I thought it was enjoyable. I thought it was really funny. It was a little bit weird in some parts, which I will come to. But as a way of spending 2 hours in the cinema when you haven't been to the cinema for a year, I say go and see it. But be prepared for a few things. Now, first of all, it is unbelievably violent, only not really. It's that kind of cartoonish, gory violence where I suppose somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 people get killed in all kinds of gruesome ways. So they get pulled apart by monsters, they get their heads and limbs chopped off, there is blood spurting everywhere, they are stabbed, they are struck with javelins, they are hit with fists and bricks and cars and burning buildings and all kinds of things. So, as I often say about these kind of films, much to my son's annoyance, lots of people get killed, but nobody really gets hurt. They have a smear of blood here, or they have a bruise here, but despite being thrown through a building or falling from a height of 200 feet onto a concrete floor, the hero never really gets hurt. So the basic plot, as I've kind of outlined, there is a mad scientist. There's always a mad scientist somewhere. And the mad scientist is holed up somewhere. And in this case, it's a South American country, which may or may not be somewhere close to Panama. Latin American country, I think would be more accurate, which may or may not be close or even similar to Panama. And this mad scientist, I mean, they originally, back 30, 40 years, they would have been ex-German Nazi scientists, but of course they're not anymore. This mad scientist is played, believe it or not, by Peter Capaldi, that Scottish actor who once played Doctor Who, and most memorably, in my opinion, is known for the great sweary monster from The Thick of It. Yes, Malcolm Tucker is now a mad scientist with a bald head and a whole kind of nuts and bolts that kind of light up sticking out of his head, which indicate, I suppose, that his brain is wired up to something. Anyway, he has been secretly and they're always secretly creating some kind of dastardly monster, but it's a secret that everybody seems to know about. And the monster is always housed in this enormous building that you think, well, hang on a minute, that looks like the kind of enormous building in which you would house a monster. So Peter Capaldi, right, who plays the mad scientist, is creating this sort of monster which is going to take over the world, as it always does. And the Suicide Squad are taken from their prisons because they're all naughty people who've committed driving offences or tried to drive cyclists off the road, or they haven't paid their particular parking fines or whatever it is. So they are incarcerated for thousands of years in the Louisiana State Penitentiary, and they are offered their freedom if they go and eliminate the monster and thereby save the world. And the rest of the film is about their adventures in trying to achieve this aim. Now, I'm not going to spoil the plot for you, so you're going to have to wait and see for yourself whether they actually destroy the monster, and you're going to have to count for yourself whether there's 5 or 6 or 17,000 people who are killed along the way. But the price of freedom is one that has to be paid by the innocent, and why not? So, who are the various stars of this film? Well, if I just go back to the Dirty Dozen for a minute, I was saying to my son that, of course, in the Dirty Dozen, they're all kind of white and they're all male. Now, I think actually there was one black actor in the Dirty Dozen, but there weren't any females. Now, you can say, well, there aren't going to be any females because this was during the Second World War, so come on, Julian, be fair. But in the Suicide Squad, of course, because of these inclusive times, there are black actors, there are Asian actors, there are females, there are strong female characters. Now, I was drawing this comparison to my son's attention. And he said, what is it with you old people? Why do you always have to compare things? For people of my age, and my son Joel is 20, he said, we don't, they just are. They're just people. They're just characters. Why do you always have to say, oh, well, yes, but back in the Dirty Dozen, they were all white actors and now they're actors of different colours. Why shouldn't they be? And he is perfectly right. Although I think I'm right in a way, because all those films back then, they didn't have strong female characters. They didn't have strong black female characters. They didn't have strong black characters generally. I know I'm generalising, but as a rule, they didn't. And that is one of the good things that movies recently, or movies in the last 5 or 10 years, or whatever it is, has changed, that you now see strong actors from different nationalities, from different races, from different genders, from different sexuality. Now you get gay actors where you never used to get gay actors, and certainly not positive role models back in the day, whereas now you do. So that is one point about the film. The other thing that I wanted to say about the film, the other film to which it bears a certain resemblance, is one of the finest, funniest films of the last 10 or 15 years, and that is Team America World Police. And if you have never seen that particular take on the Thunderbird story, then you have to see it. And there are a number of elements of Suicide Squad that draw quite heavily, I think, on Team America World Police. The other thing I want to say about it, it is very, very funny in certain circumstances. Whether it's intentionally funny or whether I just think it's funny or whether you think it's funny is another matter, but I think it's great. There's a wonderful scene where one of the members of the Suicide Squad who is killing all these people, and one of the others says to him, what's it like killing all these people? And he says, oh, it's easy. I just imagine they're my mother. And that is, there's something remarkably funny on the deadpan way in which he says it. But then thereafter, all of these monsters suddenly turn into these representations of his mother. So the monster in the film, who incidentally is a starfish, which is about 500 feet tall, he then sees as a representative of his mother, who appears on the screen looking like one of the people from My 600-Pound Life. So he's this enormous middle-aged woman who is his mother, stomping around this Latin American country, killing thousands of people, and then it disappears and it turns back into the starfish. Now, there's a couple of things about the film which I wasn't particularly keen on. One of the things is that there's an awful lot of swearing. Now, I swear all the time, and if you've watched any of my videos, you will know that I'm quite liberal in my use of bad language. So I think the occasional fuck or fucking is quite a good way of expressing yourself. But it goes a little bit over the top. There's so much fucking this and fucking that and fuck this and fuck that. You think, oh, come on, come on, guys. I know bad language is funny when you're a certain age, but after a while, you got to tone it down a little bit. So that got on my nerves after a while. One of the other characters is played by John Cena. Now, if you don't know John Cena is a world wrestling megastar. I'm sure he was world champion in a sport that only one country takes part in. And he is this enormous, muscly character. And he kind of plays against type, actually. I think he's quite good in this film. But there is a rather odd scene in it in which he's standing around in his underpants. And he stands around in his underpants for quite a long time. And it's not obviously clear why. It's not like he's just got up and he hasn't put his trousers on, or he's just about to go to bed and he's taken his trousers off and so forth. He's just kind of standing there in his underpants. Now, you might say, oh, well, yes, Julian, but you are quite happy to see Margot Robbie in a dress covering not much of her body, but when it's John Cena in his underpants, you get all sniffy about it, and you may well have a point. But I'm just not quite sure what it is. It does lead, actually, to a funny point where Idris Elba talks to him and refers to his tighty whities. And John Cena says there's no need to be racist, which I thought was actually quite funny. One of the other characters is also a bit like something out of My 600-Pound Life, and this is a shark, an absolutely enormous shark. So if you imagine the shark from Jaws only with legs, and when the shark, who of course is always hungry, comes across one of the bad people, he picks them up like that and eats them whole. Which it's a bit like watching some of the people in McDonald's down a couple of beef burgers. But I thought that scene was quite funny. The other thing is, right, there is a scene with rats. Now, Idris Elba is scared of rats, and lots of people are scared of rats. But there is a scene towards the end of the film where, for various reasons, and I won't go into the plot dynamics about why these rats turn up and the significance of the rats, but there are millions and there are billions of rats. And I think, I don't know whether they're CGI rats or whether they're real rats or cloned rats, I'm not sure, but there are billions of rats, and they swarm all over the monster for various rather complicated reasons that I'm not quite sure I remember. But I think the scene is handled really well because the rats aren't on the screen for very long. So you see them emerge in this enormous swarm, and the swarm gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and it fills the screen, and then suddenly they're gone. And you don't get to the point where you start to question the reality of the film. They're just on the screen short enough for you to think, yeah, okay, I'll buy that. I'll buy the millions and billions of rats thing. That kind of works for me. The other thing that I'm not quite sure about, there's a snatch or dialogue or an exchange which is all about eating dicks. And this goes on for quite a while, and it's obviously meant as some kind of insult. And you think, what is it with the dick business? What is it with the underpants business? I didn't quite get the necessity for that. But in terms of, is it a good film? Yeah, it's great, actually. I loved it. It is really funny. It is mad as all hell. It is surreal beyond belief. This monster is straight out of Doctor Who, and of course Doctor Who is straight out of Doctor Who because Peter Capaldi plays Doctor Who. Idris Elba is pretty good. John Cena, as I said, is pretty good. Margot Robbie, well, I had some trouble understanding some of the dialogue. Obviously, I'm of a certain age. It's not a film designed for people of my age, and she talks in this very loud kind of shrieking voice, and I missed quite a lot of her dialogue. And I'm not saying it's necessarily deathless prose, but it's that bit I missed. So what happened at the end? Well, do they get the mods? I'll leave that for you to decide. Is there a twist? I'll leave that for you to decide. Have they left it open for a sequel? I'll leave that to you to decide. My son said that the original, or the first Suicide Squad film was a pile of wank, but this film he really enjoyed, and this film I really enjoyed. So should you go and see it? Damn yes you should. Should you get back to the cinema? Damn yes you should. Go to the movies. Take your partner or your son or your children or your loved one, whatever it is. I think it's I think it's more than a 12A. I don't know whether it's an 18. I don't know what comes between 12A and 18. But there is a lot of unbelievably gratuitous, gory violence, which I found a little bit over the top at some points, but really actually quite amusing at other points. So yes, go and see it. Take your family. Love the film. I thought it was brilliant, and I can't go to the cinema. Can't wait to go to the cinema again. So thanks for watching, and see you next time.